This clip is sponsored by Med Travelers. If you're an SLP interested in travel therapy, visit medtravelers.com to get started. Did you have an interest in literacy before doing that, or was it really that thought of, okay, I want to introduce these concepts, what better way to do it than books, or was it a bridge between the two?
I always liked using books in therapy, but I found that the books that I had at school didn't look anything like the books that I was reading at home with my own daughters. And so the books that I was using were often books that were recommended by popular SLPs who I were following on social media or through their newsletters. And I found myself wanting to do a little bit more with it. So I started doing a little bit more research on literacy-based therapy and recognizing like what I was doing was an evidence-based practice, but there was so much more that I could do. And then I started looking at my book selection and how could I expand on a lot of these topics and reach the goals that I wanted to reach using books. And I noticed there was a very huge difference between the books that I chose to work with in school and the books that I would read to my younger daughter at home. And a lot of times the books that I had in school featured only animals and not people. And so I did a little bit more research and I recognized that that was part of the problem. The more that kids see people, it's easier for them to understand those lessons that we're reading books about. Like when we want to teach them about real world issues and life skills, it's easier for them to digest that information when they see a person as opposed to an animal. Often animals make it a little bit more palatable, but they really are able to apply it and then replicate the message when they see people. Then I noticed like, okay, but the people can't always look the same. And that's when I started to think about finding diverse characters and again, trying to encourage my students to see people differently through a lens where you're looking out into a window of the world, but also introducing you into new worlds and new situations that you haven't seen and mirroring back your reflections. A lot of my students weren't seeing themselves in the books that I read at work, but I knew at home with my daughters, I wanted to make sure that I always found books that affirmed their identity, that made them feel proud of their skin color, made them feel proud of their hair, even though their hair may be different than the kids in their classroom. I wanted them to know that there'll be other kids that you'll meet who don't look like you. There'll be kids who practice different customs and holidays and religions. So I was building a really diverse library to prep my kids at home, but I wasn't doing the same for my students at school. And as you mentioned, I felt like I was doing a disservice. So I took on the task to try to make sure that I felt that it was balanced for all of them so they could have that exposure and have that experience. So I guess to answer your question, I have always loved the books, but I just found that I needed to do better with the books that I was choosing and how I was using them.